I still remember the sound of the cuffs tightening, that metallic click that told the whole world I was no longer a man, just a headline waiting to happen. One minute I was a respected youth counselor, someone parents trusted with their kids. The next, I was being dragged out of my own home like some kind of monster. The cops wouldn't look me in the eye. My neighbors watched from their porches like they always suspected something about me. And when they said the words, "You're being arrested for the murder of a 17-year-old boy," something inside me cracked so violently I swear I could hear it. I kept thinking it had to be a mistake, some mix-up, some bad information, but then I saw the smirk on Detective Hall's face, that quiet satisfaction of a man who wanted this to be true. Wanted me to be the villain. When the cell door closed behind me that night, I made a promise to myself, silent but sharp as glass. I will come back for every single one of you who did this. And when I do, you'll wish I had stayed buried. Before we continue the story, tell me in the comments which country you're watching from. I love seeing where my stories reach around the world. I was halfway through reheating leftover pasta when the pounding started, that kind of knock meant to scare the life out of whoever's inside. I opened the door and suddenly there were 4 uniforms on my porch, rain dripping off their hats, hands already resting on their holsters. Officer Ruiz, someone I'd worked with before during community programs, wouldn't even meet my eyes. That's when the dread set in. Marcus Hale? One of them asked, though he already knew who I was. I nodded confused, still holding the stupid plastic fork from my dinner. You're under arrest for the murder of, the rest blurred. My brain simply refused to process it. Murder? A teenager? I actually laughed for a second before it hit me that none of them were joking. Ruiz stepped forward like he wanted to say something human, but he didn't. He just grabbed my wrist and turned me around. Neighbors gathered fast. Phones came out even faster. I heard someone whisper, I knew there was something off about him. Another said, that poor kid. And my stomach dropped because I didn't even know which kid they meant. As they dragged me toward the cruiser, the first real thought that formed was a cold, shaking one, someone is framing me, and whoever it is, they want me gone. They wouldn't let me sit for more than a minute before hauling me into the cramped interview room, the one with walls the color of old nicotine and a camera that clicked every time someone breathed wrong. Detective Hall was already there, leaning back in his chair like he'd been waiting his whole career for this moment. He slid a folder across the table. Not toward me, just close enough for me to see my own face clipped to the front. My mugshot still fresh, eyes wide with shock. Marcus, he said, like we were old friends, we've got you dead to rights. I didn't speak. I wanted a lawyer. I'd been around enough scared kids to know silence was my only shield. Hall opened the folder dramatically, page by page, like he was performing for an audience. Photos of the victim. Timestamp screenshots. A grainy clip of someone running near the crime scene, someone roughly my height. Someone who, if you squinted hard enough and desperately wanted it, could be me. You were seen in the area, he said. I worked 3 blocks from there, I replied calmly. You argued with a kid 2 months ago. I argue with half the kids in the program. It's called counseling. He smirked like he'd caught me slipping. Every piece of evidence he presented had the same smell, convenient, half-formed, built on assumption. But he treated each one like a nail for my coffin. Then he leaned in closer. Too close. People like you, he said quietly, always slip eventually. People like you. That's when I realized this wasn't an investigation. It was a mission. He didn't want the truth, he wanted a conviction. He wanted me. And for the first time since the arrest, a different kind of fear hit me. They weren't looking for the killer. They were looking for someone easy to destroy. And I'd just been selected. The courthouse smelled like cold marble and cheap coffee, the kind of place where people pretend justice is clean. But the moment I stepped inside, shackled, I knew exactly what role I'd been assigned. I wasn't a defendant. I was a villain on display. Parents from my youth program filled the benches, faces twisted with the kind of disappointment that cuts deeper than anger. A few wouldn't even look at me. One mother clutched her son like she was shielding him from a sickness. My lawyer, a public defender who looked 5 minutes from burnout, leaned toward me. Don't react to anything. They're going to paint you as unpredictable. Unpredictable, that word stung. I'd spent 10 years helping kids avoid that label. When the prosecutor started, she spoke with the smooth confidence of someone who believed every syllable she said, even the ones she'd stretched thin. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, the evidence will show that Marcus Hale had motive, opportunity, and the temperament. Temperament. There it was again. She played the grainy surveillance clip. The jury squinted. Some glanced at me, already convinced. Hall sat in the front row, arms folded, a smug, settled expression on his face, like this was his victory lap. Then came the testimony. A teenager from my program said he'd overheard me raising my voice at the victim months earlier. He avoided my eyes the whole time. Another kid said he'd once seen me lose my temper during a group session. That one hurt the most, because he was lying, and I knew exactly who pushed him to do it. By the time they were done twisting my work into some kind of violent profile, the jury didn't see a counselor. They saw a man built out of warning signs. When the judge denied bail for the safety of the community, a cold wave went through the room. My life, my reputation, my dignity, all collapsing in slow motion. And as they led me away, I caught Hall's smile. Not the smile of a man who found the truth. The smile of a man who just buried it. Jail changes you fast. Not gradually, not over months, but in the first 10 minutes, when reality slams into you harder than any punch ever could. The guards didn't see me as innocent. The inmates definitely didn't. Word spreads fast when the charge is murder. Faster when the victim is a kid. My cellmate, a wiry guy with restless eyes, looked me over the first night like he was trying to decide whether I was prey or a problem. "What did they say you did?" he asked. I told him. He let out a low whistle. Rough one to shake off. Man. That was the theme. Everywhere I went, the chow line, the yard, the showers, people stared like I was contagious. Some avoided me entirely. Others muttered things under their breath, loud enough to make sure I heard. A couple guys tried testing me early on, shoving, posturing, trying to see if I'd snap. I didn't. I couldn't. Any altercation would convince the world I was exactly what they thought I was. But the worst part wasn't the inmates. It was the silence from the outside. The youth center put out a statement cutting ties. Parents who used to praise me now posted comments saying they always felt uneasy. Friends I'd known for years vanished. Each day, a piece of my old identity peeled off: counselor, mentor, role model, until all that was left was the label they forced on me. Murderer. Monster. A name I never chose but couldn't escape. There were nights I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment that led to this hell, trying to find the point where I could have stopped it. But the truth clawed deeper every time. This wasn't an accident, someone wanted me erased. And as that truth settled in my bones, something colder began to grow beside it. Not hatred, not rage. Something sharper. One day I was going to find out who did this. And I'd tear their world down with my bare hands. It happened on a Tuesday, the kind of dull, empty day where nothing is supposed to change. I was in the library, pretending to read a beaten-up psychology textbook so I didn't have to make eye contact with anyone. That's when a guard tapped the table with 2 fingers. "You've got mail." I didn't get mail. Not anymore. The envelope was plain, no return address, just my name written in small, tight handwriting. I opened it cautiously, half expecting some hate-filled letter from a stranger who'd watched my case on the news. Instead, a single sheet of paper slid out. 1 sentence. They lied about the timeline. I stared at it so long my vision blurred. No signature. No explanation. Just that line, but it hit me harder than any punch I'd taken inside. Because if the timeline was wrong, then everything else they built, the motive, the surveillance clip, the supposed opportunity, collapsed with it. I folded the paper and hid it in my shoe before anyone noticed. All afternoon, my heart wouldn't slow down. I kept replaying the trial in my head, the prosecution's smug confidence, the way Hall had leaned back with that satisfied smirk. They'd been so certain. Too certain. As if the narrative hadn't formed from evidence, but from intention. That night in my cell, while my cellmate snored and the fluorescent lights buzzed like insects, I pulled the note back out. I held it under the thin beam coming from the hallway and read it again and again. Who sent this? How did they know? And why send it now? But the biggest question, the one burning hot in my chest, was this. If they lied about the timeline, what else did they bury? For the first time since the arrest, I felt something shift. Hope? No. Hope was too soft. This was clarity, the sharp, dangerous kind. Someone out there knew the truth. And they'd just cracked the first piece of the wall built around me. I didn't expect the second message to come so soon. 2 weeks after the first note, I was called into a meeting room. No warning, no explanation. Those rooms always made me uneasy, too quiet, too clean, like they were designed to make you confess to things you didn't do. Inside sat an older man in a gray suit, thinning hair, eyes that looked like they'd seen too much and trusted too little. He introduced himself in a low voice. "My name's Carter. I used to work evidence processing for the county." Used to. That word carried weight. He didn't bother with small talk. He closed the door, glanced at the camera in the corner, then set a folder on the table between us. "I don't have long," he said. "But I'm here because what happened to you isn't just wrong, it's intentional." My throat tightened, but I forced myself to stay still. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing. But you need to know what they did." He opened the folder just enough for me to see the corner of a lab report, the kind I'd only seen once during trial before Hall snatched it back like it was radioactive. Carter tapped the paper with one blunt finger. "This was the DNA swab taken from the victim's jacket. It didn't match you. Not even close." My breath caught. That was never presented in court. He gave a humorless laugh. "It was never processed for court. Hall had it logged as inconclusive. He told the lab to hold off until further notice." "You know what that means?" It hit me like a punch. "They buried it." "They buried a lot," Carter said. His voice softened, almost apologetic. "The system rewards people who bring in convictions, not truth. And Hall. He was chasing a promotion." My hands curled into fists under the table. A tremor ran through me, rage, disbelief, a grief so raw it felt like acid. "Why are you telling me this now?" He looked toward the camera again, hesitating. "Because I'm retiring. And I'm not leaving with this on my conscience." Before I could say another word, he stood, pushing the folder toward me only an inch, close enough to tempt, not close enough to be caught. "I can't give it to you," he whispered. "But I can tell you this, the DNA didn't match you. It matched someone they know. Someone they protected." My heart stopped. "Protected? Who?" Carter reached the door, paused, and without turning around, said one last thing. "Follow the DNA. It'll lead you straight to the real killer, and the people who helped him walk free." Then he left. Just like that. And I sat alone in that cold little room, my pulse hammering, knowing this wasn't just a crack anymore. It was a fault line, and everything built on their lies was about to split wide open. The next morning, I woke with a feeling I hadn't had in years: purpose. Not hope. Not relief. Something darker, steadier. A sense that the walls closing in on me were finally starting to crack under their own weight. I spent the day replaying every word Carter had said. Follow the DNA. But I had no folder, no report, nothing physical. All I had was the knowledge that evidence existed, evidence they'd kept hidden. Evidence that could burn their whole case to ash. I waited for the right moment. Late afternoon, the library was almost empty. I sat at one of the old desktop computers, the ones so outdated they still hummed like generators. Access was limited, monitored, but I didn't need freedom, just a direction. I searched every appeal case I could find involving our county lab. It didn't take long before a pattern started to form: delays, inconclusive reports, samples marked insufficient when they clearly weren't. Different defendants, different charges, but the same names kept showing up on the paperwork. Hall. And a lab tech named R. Dwyer. Dwyer. I knew that name. She'd testified at my trial that no viable DNA was recovered from the victim's clothing. I remember the way she delivered the line: mechanical, rehearsed, like someone reading from a script written by someone else. My pulse climbed. I kept digging, clicking through public records until I hit something that made my blood run cold. 3 years before my arrest, Dwyer had processed another case involving a teenager killed near the same block. That case was dismissed because the DNA had mysteriously degraded. The suspect walked. The suspect's name? Evan Hall. Detective Hall's nephew. I sat back slowly, the chair creaking under me. The room suddenly felt too small, too bright, too exposed. My vision tunneled as the realization hit. Hall didn't just bury the DNA. He buried it because it pointed to someone he was protecting. Not metaphorically. Not professionally. Family. I shut down the computer before the guard could see the fury rising in me. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from clarity. The kind that strips away any illusion you had left about justice or fairness or coincidence. They didn't just frame me. They traded my life for his nephew's freedom. And now I knew exactly who the real killer was. For the first time since the cuffs closed around my wrists, I felt the future tilt in my favor, not as a gift, but as a weapon I could finally wield. The moment I learned Hall's nephew was the real suspect, something inside me sharpened. Not hope, precision. Like all the noise in my head finally fell away, leaving only one clear objective: expose them one piece at a time, until the whole rotten structure collapsed. But I couldn't do anything from inside a cell. Not directly. So I started small. A casual question here. A quiet observation there. In jail, information moves differently, not in straight lines, but sideways, through people who act like they're not paying attention. And I knew one guy who had a cousin who worked janitorial at the courthouse. Another knew someone in probation. A third had a sister who used to date a tech at the county lab. I never asked outright. I just sparked conversations, tiny, careful sparks, and waited for anything flammable. 3 days later, one of the guys from the yard sat next to me at dinner, sliding his tray with a subtle nudge. "You were asking about the lab, right?" he muttered. "Not asking," I said. "Just thinking out loud." He smirked. "Well, someone's been talking. Dwyer, the tech, she just got pulled into internal review. Quietly. Off the books." My pulse jumped. Rumor says she screwed up a case years ago. Something about DNA mishandling. Not screwed up, covered up. I kept my face neutral. Internal review means nothing. He shrugged. Maybe. But when people start digging in one place, they usually find dirt in another. Exactly. It was starting. A small crack, barely visible, but cracks spread. They travel through everything that's been under pressure too long. That night, after lockdown, I lay on my bunk staring at the ceiling, replaying every detail. Hall's confidence. His smug certainty. Dwyer's rehearsed testimony. The mysterious failures in multiple cases. They built their careers on shortcuts and lies, trusting no one would ever trace the rot back to them. But now people were looking. And the irony was almost poetic. The truth wasn't breaking free because of me. It was eating its way outward from inside their own system. Pressure. Corruption. Secrets. Rot always shows before it finally collapses. Then came the moment that confirmed everything. Lights out had just been called when a guard stopped at my cell. Not my usual guard, this one looked nervous, shifting his weight from foot to foot like he wasn't supposed to be there. Without making eye contact, he slipped a folded note through the bars and walked off before I could ask a single question. I opened it under the dim hallway glow. Dwyer confessed. The DNA wasn't degraded. It was hidden. They're reopening your case. For a long time, I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Reopening the case meant scrutiny. Scrutiny meant exposure. Exposure meant the beginning of the end for all of them. For the first time in years, I felt the smallest hint of satisfaction, not joy, not relief, but the cold acknowledgement that justice, real justice, was finally waking up. And it was coming for them. They woke me before sunrise, 2 guards at my door, unusually formal, no snark, no swagger. One of them said my name with this stiff, careful tone, the kind people use when they know a storm is coming but don't want to be in its path. "Hale, you've been requested for transport." Requested. Not ordered. Not summoned. Requested. I sat up slowly, pulse already thudding. Neither answered. They just cuffed me and walked me down the silent corridor. Every step echoed. Every inmate who saw me pass fell quiet. Even they could sense something had shifted. At the administrative wing, a conference room waited, 2 suits, a state investigator, and my exhausted public defender who looked like he'd been dragged out of bed. Papers were stacked in front of them. A voice recorder sat in the center of the table. The investigator spoke first. "Mr. Hale. The DNA analysis from the victim's jacket was re-examined." Re-examined. They skipped over the part where it had been buried, hidden, suppressed. He cleared his throat, sliding a report toward me. A full profile was recovered. "It does not match you." I didn't touch the paper. My hands were shaking too much. My lawyer leaned in. "Marcus, it matches someone else. A known individual." I already knew. My stomach nodded. "Say his name." The investigator hesitated, then exhaled. "Evan Hall." Silence detonated across the room. I felt my whole body tense, not in shock, but in confirmation. Like the universe finally said, "You were right. They did this to you." My lawyer rubbed his forehead. "The nephew of Detective Hall." Detective Hall. The man who'd built his entire case on my supposed temperament? The man who'd smiled when the judge denied my bail? The man who'd written the narrative, forced the witnesses, reshaped the evidence to fit the story he wanted? The investigator kept talking. We have reason to believe evidence was intentionally misclassified. Lab personnel have admitted misconduct under direction from law enforcement. Name him, I said, voice steady, colder than I intended. The investigator didn't look away. Detective Leonard Hall is under active investigation. The room felt too bright. Too small. The edges of my vision flickered. I swallowed hard. And what happens now? We're filing a motion to vacate your conviction, he said. Effective immediately. You'll be released today. For a moment, I couldn't move. Couldn't speak. Years of humiliation, isolation, rage, all compressed behind my ribs, crushing from the inside out. And then, in one brutal second, all I could think about was this. They stole everything from me. And they get a hearing? I forced myself to nod, but inside, something dark and precise locked into place. Being released wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Because now the truth was out. Now the cracks weren't just forming, they were gaping open. And the people who framed me were no longer protected by uniforms or badges or the illusion of authority. They were exposed. And I was finally free to destroy them. Freedom didn't feel like freedom that first day. It felt like walking out of a burning building, alive, yes, but smoke still in my lungs, flames still at my back. Reporters were waiting outside the courthouse, shouting questions, cameras shoved forward like weapons. My lawyer tried to shield me, but I wasn't the same man they'd caged. I kept walking. Past the crowd. Past the flashing lights. Past the place where my life had been executed years earlier. I didn't go home. I didn't have a home anymore. I went somewhere better. City Hall. Internal Affairs. The building where they pretend accountability isn't a myth. When I walked in, the receptionist's eyes widened like she recognized me from the headlines, the old ones, painted with lies, and the new ones, dripping with guilt. I need to speak to the lead investigator on the Hall case, I said. She stammered. Do you have an appointment? No, I said, but he'll want to see me. And he did. They took me to a closed-door office where the investigator, the same one who delivered the DNA report, waited with a folder so thick it barely closed. He gestured for me to sit, but I didn't. He sighed, tapping the stack. Everything is unraveling. Witness tampering. Evidence suppression. Coercion. False statements. It's worse than we thought. Good, I said. Let it all come out. He studied me. You know this could go to trial. It will, I told him. Every piece. Every lie. Every name. He hesitated before adding, Hall's already been suspended. His nephew is in custody. I let that sink in, not with satisfaction, but with a cold, steady calm. They ruined my life, I said. They don't get to walk away with a suspension. They won't, he replied. But we need your statement. A full one. And I gave it. Every detail. Every manipulation. Every crack in their story. Every moment Hall violated procedure to force his narrative. For hours, I laid out the truth they'd tried to bury, piece by piece, brick by brick, until the entire structure of their corruption was exposed under fluorescent light. By the time I finished, the investigator leaned back, exhausted but impressed. You just ended their careers, he said quietly. I shook my head. No. I'm ending their freedom. Over the next weeks, the collapse was spectacular. Hall was arrested, not escorted, not retired, arrested. Dwyer flipped, naming every officer who'd pressured her. Supervisors who ignored complaints were dragged into hearings. The DA who pushed my case for the conviction stats was placed under review. Their world, the one built on arrogance and untouchable authority, cracked exactly the way corruption always cracks, from the inside. The day Hall's mugshot went public, I sat on a bus bench across from the station, watching officers escort him inside in cuffs. He tried to hide his face from the cameras, but the world saw him, the detective who framed an innocent man to protect a murderer in his own bloodline. I didn't smile. Revenge isn't a smile. Revenge is silence. Revenge is watching the people who destroyed you fall under the weight of their own lies. And as the bus hissed to a stop beside me, I stood up slowly, finally breathing air that didn't taste like confinement. They framed me. They humiliated me. They stole years I'll never get back. But I buried them with the truth. And now, I walk free. They never will.